world headquarters of common sense.
Talk Radio.
I do want to talk to you about the COVID restrictions here, but let's just talk first also about the handling of COVID in Canada. I think most right-thinking people have been horrified by the authoritarian measures taken by Justin Trudeau. But the fact that they've actually ended the truck convoy and the occupation, for all intents and purposes, of the capital city of Ottawa, but continued with the Emergencies Act, the Prime Minister saying as long as it's needed, is incredibly worrying, isn't it?
It is indeed, and yet quite a lot of the politicians around the world in Western countries are turning a blind eye in terms of condemnation of this. Yeah. I suggest that if the behaviour of Trudeau had applied to, say, Putin or even, say, previously Donald Trump, there would be a lot of outrage about this. Now, this is a wider debate about what defines progressive politics, considering Trudeau is supposed to be the self-styled poster boy of progressive politics. But how is it progressive politics to have sort of the heavy forces of the police to interrupt what's largely a peaceful protest, considering that protest, many of the protesters have been handing out food to the homeless and they've been putting flowers down in front of the police and so on, freezing bank accounts. All of this smacks of despotic regime. Yeah. And yet if it was happening, say, in a banana republic, then the world's leaders would be condemning it. But because it's Justin Trudeau, at the moment, a lot of the world seem to be turning a blind eye to this. And I agree that in terms of the emergency powers, 7 of the 10 provinces said, well, they're going to roll back on these restrictions and also mandates. And yet it's being enforced by the Canadian government. And it was obviously voted through Parliament. The protest is dissipating a bit. The truckers have actually made their point because the provinces were rolling back on the restrictions. That is effective mobilization of largely peaceful people power, and yet that protest has been smeared by Trudeau to be something that it's not.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, very much, again, totally out of the Putin playbook here, actually. There's the smearing of the people, the extraordinary actions taken against peaceful protests, emergency powers, which were supposed to be aimed at tackling, deadly terrorists as opposed to truckers, as you say, setting up bouncy castles for kids. There's no doubt at all. Democracy is messy. Public protest is messy. I don't like it when Extinction Rebellion are blocking, London's roads or Insulate Britain blocking the M25. It's messy. Unfortunately, you have to put up with a bit of it if you want to live in a lively, vibrant democracy with free speech. But the smearing of these truckers as racist, as xenophobic, as transphobic. I mean, every ick he could get in with, as far as I can tell, no evidence whatsoever and totally irrelevant, even if those were their views. These were people protesting against very authoritarian measures that have no scientific evidence base, like vaccine passports and vaccine mandates for workers and the like. And why do you think that the West, other Western leaders, haven't spoken out? As you say, if Donald Trump had done this, they would be absolutely horrified. Why is it that Justin Trudeau gets a free pass?
Well, I think it's an inconvenient truth, isn't it? I mean, it's like pick a dictator. And I have a problem with this. I sit slightly in the left of centre, even though the fact that I've been calling out Trudeau's behaviour seems to make me some sort of right-wing shill right now. Yeah. And I think there's a definition about what is truly progressive liberal politics. And Trudeau isn't displaying it. He's previously supported, say, for instance, farmers' protests in India. And you see in his Twitter feed, you see some of the speeches that he's made, he's constantly championing the cause of liberalism and freedom of expression, freedom of choice. But when it actually lands on his doorstep on a particular campaign that puts himself under a little bit of threat, he doesn't live up to the very words that he's actually done before. And to extend the emergency powers does give the feeling that authoritarianism, where does this end? It's mission creep in terms of grabbing power away from the people. This protest is largely a peaceful protest on a number of different elements, such as vaccine mandates and passports, a concern about a clawback of freedoms by the state. And we end up in a situation whereby Trudeau is not behaving like the person he claims to be. Yeah. And the Western leaders and a lot of the media should be looking at this, and to be balanced about it, they should be calling out his behaviour in the same way they would call out any other leader that's not part of, say, a Western society in the same way, but they're not doing it.
Absolutely. Well, what do you make of the announcement from the Prime Minister here in the UK ending all of those COVID rules a month earlier than the emergency legislation would have allowed? There will be a vote in Parliament to end that legislation. We're also seeing the end of free mass community testing, sort of, roll up, you're perfectly healthy, but you're going to do a test every single day. We don't do that for any other disease. As of the 1st of April, also that ending that legal duty to self-isolate if you know you're COVID positive. What do you make of the decision to bring that forward and indeed the reaction to it from so many, so Keir Starmer and many others, who appear to be absolutely horrified by the idea of us living freely?
Well, I think it's a case, we say follow the science, but we should be following the data. Now, the data currently states that based in terms of excess deaths, all-in excess deaths, we're actually below sort of the 5-year average. That is a clear indicator, and Whitty pointed this out yesterday, that is a clear indicator that we need to get back to normal. Now, I'm of a view that basically a lot of the restrictions, particularly the lockdowns, haven't worked. They've been counterproductive, and we cannot go through that cycle again. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that actually it had minimal effect, but it caused a lot of collateral damages. We are where we are, and I welcome the fact that the restrictions and mandates have now gone. We hopefully can go back to normal life. Businesses can open. We can rebuild a sense of national confidence finally as well. And I think the government needs to start doing that, because there's been a lot of damage done over the last 2 years where people are either scared or they're compliant or they're confused. And now we need to get to a point whereby we're moving forward. I'm glad these restrictions have gone. We now need to create a model that I think is pretty similar to the response of flu. If the vulnerable want to have the jab, let them have the jab. But what we shouldn't be doing is forms of coercion to get the jab, and also restricting people's rights to open their business, for their kids to go to school, for the kids basically needing normal, healthy childhood. Yeah. And it's about time we got to that point. And the data indicates that we have got to that point. Well,
frankly, we were at that point about 18 months ago. And that's the really sad thing. And people have come to their senses now. A lot of people don't want to come to their senses. A lot of people seem to enjoy either restrictions on their own lives. It's like the people who go, oh, close nightclubs. People who've never been to a nightclub, let alone have been to one in the last year. People who want to control people's ability to show their faces, to travel abroad. There seem to be an awful lot of people that think that everyone else around them is very untrustworthy. They won't make common sense decisions about their and others' health. They're immoral. There seems to be a massive distrust that an awful lot of people in this country who are absolutely obsessed with COVID restrictions seem to have.
Yeah, it's become another divisive thing, isn't it? There's almost two sides to the debate. And, I know obviously over the Brexit debate it was exactly the same, but
we were on opposite sides on that. Yeah.
We were indeed for a very long time, but we meet on this one. And I think that's kind of a lesson about how you should conduct politics. Is that I take the view that I do not go down a particular tribe of political parties. They take things from all different parts. There's good and bad policies on all sides, but there's too much toxic tribalism, too much division, and people need to take a step back and actually realise it's healthy to have respectful debate. But I agree, there's a certain type of individual almost give the impression they want these restrictions to continue. Yeah. Well, fine. If they want to continue the restrictions and they want to hide away from society and they want to stay at home and they want to wear a mask, fine. I'm not going to do that. That's my personal choice. And the data would indicate that it is time for us all to open up and get back to normal. But if people want to wrap themselves up in cotton wool and stay at home, that's their choice as well.
Good talk. Hot talk.
Bold talk. Talk radio.
Listen on your smart speaker.
Watch it live on your smart TV.
The world headquarters of common sense.
Talk radio.